Today is a very special day. We are recording podcast in broad daylight. That must tell you that this podcast is going to be enlightening. Akshay, who's our guest today?
It's well beyond Tanmay's waking hours. So today's guest is Balaji Srinivasan. We're very excited for this episode. He's a friend of the pod, former CTO of Coinbase, former general partner of Andreessen Horowitz, or as like Tanmay, you like to say, A16G.
A16G. It's just a joke. It's just a joke. Chris Dixon follows me. I don't want to mess around.
And an exciting array of topics that to cover today.
And this episode is really important for a bunch of reasons. One, it's Balaji Srinivasan. Okay, it's the main one. Okay, so you guys the retention on this better be crazy high. If you're not sitting with, your significant other or your loved one on New Year's Eve and watching this, you're doing it wrong. Second, the ideas that Balaji talks about in this episode is stuff that Akshay and me have often discussed. It's a lot of stuff that we believe in. It's a lot of stuff that coincides with the missions of the DAO. So that's why it's also really important to us personally. For example, one of the ideas that Balaji speaks in the episode is about India being a media superpower, which is something that I believed in, but I never actually felt it until, we started working with global projects and I realized that, my marketing thoughts and content translates internationally as well. Of course, we have a lot of developers around, but what people don't realize is the potential for Indian talent to make media at a global stage, right?
Yeah, I mean, just like, you have computer code that scripts how computers behave. You have media that scripts how humans behave. And, if we can ship global products from India, as we have seen with SaaS companies and now with crypto startups, there's no reason why you can't ship global media from India.
So in this episode, we have a bunch of tasks, all right? Everybody who's watching this, we are looking for a certain type of people who can watch this episode, grasp the ideas, and turn it into content, okay? For example, we are looking for folks who can create video memes about the ideas in this episode. Ideally video memes if you can create memes. Otherwise, that's fine too. Just submit your memes. We are also looking for people who can do visual effects, all right? Visual effects, motion graphics, infographics that can show up beautifully. We want these folks in the DAO. So if you can create motion graphics, then look at this episode, look at the themes in this episode, the ideas in this episode, make a video with some beautiful motion graphics, and then apply, and the best ones will get into the DAO and also get a cash prize. We're looking for folks who are graphic designers, illustrators. So if you can look at this episode and see themes in this episode, turn them into illustrations, turn them into a poster, any sort of graphic design, that would be great, and apply with the link in the description. The best ones get into the DAO, and of course they get a cash prize. And of course we're looking for writers, Akshay, folks who can summarize this podcast, in a beautiful way through a Twitter thread, or pick up an idea from this podcast, and there are many ideas, by the way, and write an essay about it, tweet to us, or apply via the form. You too are required in the DAO. All the folks who get into the DAO, there'll be opportunities to work at a global stage with global marketing companies, earn in a global currency. And I am personally looking at building a marketing team within the DAO for both Indian companies and global companies as well. So it's an opportunity to work with both me and Akshay in the DAO. So if you can, do apply and, just spend some time on it. I hope it'll be worth it for you to watch the full episode. On that note, Akshay, that's it. Let's just get into it.
Let's do it.
And the thing is, as I mentioned in my tweet, a few days ago, I'm moderately bullish on India, but extremely bullish on Indians. And what I mean by that is when people say they're bullish on China, a large part of that means they're bullish on the Chinese state. Now, today that's changed because it's hard to invest in China. BlackRock is still doing it. But really a big part of when you think of, modern China, for example, is the infrastructure build out, the surveillance state, the military. Certainly the entrepreneurs, especially the tech entrepreneurs, are not state controlled on the way up. But when they get to the top, they're state controlled, and WeChat, and it plugs into all the infra and so on, right? So with India, though, I think while there's absolutely some great things happening like India Stack and Reliance Geo in terms of getting connectivity, there the bet is a little different, which is it's more that Indians have actually been like the initial wave, the 5 million or so that is come out of India and landed in the US, the UK, Canada, Australia has done quite well. And then the question is how many more can perform at that world-class level within India? And I think there's potentially quite a lot. We don't know. In a decentralized world, the diaspora with the networking back to India itself, India is like sort of a base where you might go and be there for a year or two in between your next assignment abroad somewhere else. If you think of it like that, right? In some ways, like Israel, right, where you have folks, you have diaspora who will be in Israel and come back, and maybe they will decide to spend some time in Argentina or in France. Like Israelis will have multiple passports typically. That kind of thing I think is going to become more and more common. And it's also in particular because with the Chinese diaspora, they're going to be running into problems given how assertive and hostile in some ways the Chinese state has been. So the reason is, the Chinese diaspora is also huge. It's global. But things like the Meng Wanzhou case, for example, in Canada, where that's a Huawei CFO. She was detained in Canada. And the Chinese in return basically took 2 people hostage in China, 2 Canadians. And the reason is they felt that was a political detention. They didn't think that was an actual crime that she had done. So for violating that U.S. sanction, she was detained in Canada for violating an American law as a Chinese citizen, right? So things start to get gnarly there, and so the Chinese diaspora is starting to get interfered with overseas. So they may only want to post up in those countries where they have hard power, whereas the Indian diaspora I don't think will have that problem. And China doesn't really take India that seriously. So it's not going to try to, I think, impede Indian migration, and I don't think the West will either. So India may be one of the kind of dark horses in terms of its global mobility. And the reason, by the way, why do I kind of stress the migration so heavily? It's the ability to migrate, as I just mentioned, the geopolitics of it, where Chinese citizens may start to get more restricted, are already getting more restricted in some ways. For example, a lot of F1 visas for Chinese nationals were denied to the U.S. And also maybe not wanting to move for various reasons. Indian citizens won't be, but Indians also have the willingness to move if necessary, whether to pack up and live in the Gulf or, be a peripatetic, student in the U.S. There's like a greater willingness to kind of go and do that. And, it's obvious, like Sundar Satya, Kamala Harris, the success of Indians abroad, I think, is actually pretty substantial. You can argue China, for example, plays the world's best home game, but India plays the world's best away game. And I think that's true. There's that, like the movie Super 30. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Yeah. At the beginning, essentially, he's kind of voiceover guy, is, talking about, India is a third world country, but, who's the CEO of Google? Well, you can Google it, right? The thing here is not to be like irrationally optimistic, but to realize, yeah, you can do it.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
Right? You can, there is no limit to you. Removing that psychological ceiling is pretty important, that Indians can compete at a world-class level. If you look at what Polygon and Matic, or Polygon/Matic have done, Oyo, we have all of these unicorns now. We have all of the success abroad.
I think the more Polygons and Matics and Sundar Pichais and Oyos, that actually makes you feel like, okay, this is possible. And actually I have seen this in the last 2 years. It's fashionable it's become really cool to have your own startup. It's no longer cool to work. It's no longer cool to have a job. I mean, this has been true for the last decade, but now this is the top, right? Like it's never been this there.
One area that I think is very underestimated, I actually think India, if China was and is a tech and manufacturing superpower, I think India becomes a tech and media superpower. Why do I think India can become a media superpower? Well, several reasons. First is Indians have shown an ability to succeed in media in the West. There's lots of, while I'm not sure it's a credit to India, there's many journalists who have become journalists. But there's many authors. There's obviously M. Night Shyamalan in Hollywood, but then many others. There's Aziz Ansari and so on, and then more generally South Asians have done quite well. But Indians are also actually behind the camera, where a lot of computer graphics, for like Pixar and stuff like that, are often done in India. A lot of animation, hand animation, and computer animation is done in India. That's been like a strength of India for a long time.
This has been true for a very long time. I remember we used to stay back in the theater just to see Indian names in the credits, right? During animated movies. It was a thing I used to do with my parents.
That's right. And so here's the thing. Just like the Chinese, swallowed their pride and they started out making plastic stuff for Walmart and getting basically people bossing them around at their factories and so on. And,
Made in China was a joke, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They just saw it was just a plastic of Walmart. But you know what? They ascended the value chain, right? They ascended the value chain. They learned from making the plastic stuff. And then they went and did, assembly for iPhones and so on. And now suddenly they're doing, DJI drones and, if you saw the recent thing, hypersonic missiles. And they've got a pretty sophisticated military. And they've got a pretty sophisticated infrastructure, and they're nobody's fool. I mean, there's still areas where they're not number one, but they're focused on getting number one in everything physical, right? And I think that, frankly, Indians can get number one in everything digital. Not just computer science, where I think people now feel that is the case. Media, this decade, India can become a media superpower. And let me explain more concretely what I mean by that. First, I do not mean that Bollywood becomes super popular globally, because that's the obvious thing that people think. What are you saying? Bollywood is going to replace Hollywood? I'm not saying that, but there's a big difference. For example, if you think about a Chinese origin chair, a made-in origin chair from China, you may be sitting on one right now. Do you think of it as Chinese? Not really. You think of it as a globally competitive product that was made in China, as distinct from, let's say, dim sum, right, or red envelopes. That's like a Chinese cultural thing. Those are things that are distinctively Chinese. You don't think about those when interacting with the chair. The chair is like a global product, right? So Bollywood or laddus or something, that's like distinctively Indian. An interesting question is, what is the global product that just happens to be made in India? Okay. And what does that look like, for example, in media? Well, it may look like VR movies. It may look like video games. It may look like content that analyzes the whole world. It is no longer. It's memes. Yeah, exactly. It's NFTs, right? The thing is that one of the reasons Indians are particularly successful in software is there's a new industry which didn't have the existing hierarchies, of the old, right? And they've become successful in politics and media and whatnot, but particularly so in software because it's all leveled out with a keyboard. It's all being leveled out, and anything you want to do, you can do with a keyboard? Media. Okay? Like, basically, you used to need, we still take this for granted because I think it's still a traveling wave which hasn't fully hit, right? But you used to need Hollywood for distribution. I mean,
correct.
Here's one way to kind of level set. 30 years ago, you ever heard of the Unabomber? So I think late 80s, early 90s, he sent a bunch of bombs to universities and other places. His goal was to get a manifesto published in, I think, the Washington Post and other places. And you can read that manifesto or what have you online. And he killed for the distribution. Okay?
Wow.
If you think about that, 30 years ago, distribution was so scarce, the Unabomber would literally go and kill people for an op-ed in the Post. The thing about that is that's within human lifespan. I remember that time. But that helps calibrate how scarce it was, the hammerlock of relatively few people. Like, oh my God, you're on TV? Wow. Right? Like, that was like this huge deal to be on TV at some point. It was like a very small group of people who controlled mass media. It was like a few tens of thousands of people, and then, a few dozen folks who run the major studios and could greenlight things. And so there were just choke points of mass media because you needed a TV license, or you needed, to own a movie studio, or you needed a radio license, or some of these choke points. And what the internet did is it basically repealed all of that. It's all zeroed out. You don't need a TV license to broadcast on YouTube. You don't need a radio license to set up on SoundCloud. You don't need to be the post office to send an email. It effectively, quote, legal. I don't usually use the term deregulate because it sounds negative. It legalized or decriminalized the process of doing radio without a license or whatever, okay? We take that for granted, but that was a really, really big deal. Remember, again, going back to my theme about we're in this invisible box and we can't see what is outside it until, because the benefit isn't immediate. You need to allow people to kind of, they look into blinking into the daylight, and then they start actually migrating towards this new point in.
Oh yeah, I'm a product of this deregulation.
Yes. Yeah. As I said, you're one of the doubts. No, I'm just kidding.
One of the things I have
your show is actually really large and really good, and actually I think it is a good sort of transitional element where it shows how competitive India can be. In fact, I'm not sure if it was Kunal Shah or somebody else who pointed out that there are all these tech companies do this arbitrage where they pile up the users in India and the money in the rest of the world, right? And that combination looks good.
India's a DAO country, right? Not an ARPU country. That's why I think that's what Kunal keeps talking about.
That's right. But I think that you don't actually want it to be an ARPU country necessarily, because that's a country of consumers. I think what India could level up in dramatically is as a country of producers of the back end for digital tasks. So digital outsourcing via crypto, a lot of the DAOs, a lot of those tasks are very well suited for lots of Indians doing on their phone. DAOs are very underrated in terms of, having lots of Indians on their phones doing things. You're still going to have to coordinate, you're still going to have to have, both algorithms and humans curate the work product coming up, but lots of things can be potentially converted into digital assembly line like things. Okay, so putting the pieces together. India becomes a media superpower means just like China makes a global chair that's not Chinese, Indians start to make global content that's not recognizably Indian. It could be done in an Indian accent, that's fine, but if it's pseudonymous, you don't even see that part. You're watching a cartoon or a YouTube channel where it's all computer generated, but it's made in India. Nobody knows that. Okay, you're reading an article. It's not read in an accent, but it's just on drones or something like that, and maybe in the very fine print. It's not that you're not proud of it, but you're not front paging it. It's not the reason people are buying it any more that the reason that they're buying this tomato is because it was made in a particular place. India becomes a media superpower is also true for another reason, which is America is declining as a media superpower. Okay, most people don't fully understand this, but Hollywood sucks now in many ways. Like if you go and look at the recent movies and so on, it's not just the sequels and the reruns. That's been happening for a long time. Like the lack of creativity. I mean, how many Batman movies can you possibly make? It's just literally the same stuff over
As
and over
Tanmay drinks
again.
from a Netflix cup.
Yeah, exactly. But
Actually, on Netflix, the top shows are all global now. Like Squid Game is a great example, right?
yes,
Like,
that is new, right? That is global stuff influencing an American and other audience. America is starting to become acted upon from a media perspective rather than just a media exporter. The reason that's important, just to pull all the pieces together, A, India has the opportunity to become a media superpower because B, Indians have already been successful abroad. C, they've now become familiarized with social media. D, they speak English. Okay. E, the U.S. media is actually declining on the world stage with global things starting to become popular and acting upon the U.S. F, the U.S. media actually all sounds like woke at the same time, right? G, and so the niches have been abandoned, by the way. What that means is the Sports Illustrated niche, the Teen Vogue niche, you could just go in and like one Indian guy or somebody anywhere in the world who speaks English, who's now familiar with U.S. culture or any other culture, could just go in and just start doing a Substack or a YouTube that crushes Sports Illustrated or Teen Vogue. And you would win. Like that's the thing. Like the anything you can do with a keyboard and mouse, that's something that like you can kind of now contest, right? You can contest that niche. Also, one of the things is by being on the other side of the globe, you can't be canceled by them, right? It's like, who cares? It's a different, literally a social network, right? And you might, for example, you might come in with a different cut on it. You might not do exactly Sports Illustrated, but you might do, for example, theathletic.com, right? It's a recent startup that kind of went after sports, right? I'm sure basically every niche that all these guys have abandoned to just sing the same woke hymns, right? You can go after those and do them better and do them global.
There's actually a lot of stuff here that we've been thinking about as we're putting together a DAO, which is what are the types of tasks that you can create within the DAO that can showcase Indian talent at a global scale. Product is obviously one, content is the other. In fact, we experimented with this thing where, Tanmay and I
exactly
are part of this.
Like everything he's
NFT.
saying, it's already happening, right? So Akshay and me are part of a global Discord, right? Nothing to do with India. It's just a Discord with some crypto enthusiasts. So we got some of talent that we know. They're Indian kids spread across the country they made some content and we posted on the Discord and everyone loved it. They have no idea who we are. They have no idea who made it. And they posted it and a global community appreciated it.
And
was
guess
just
what?
a moment.
We had an Australian guy do a voiceover on it for $30 on that meme video. And so there was absolutely no footprint or fingerprint of where that video came from geographically.
Yeah.
But it was written by three.
Yeah, it was
Indian
written in
people who-
Mumbai, voiceover done in Australia. It was edited by someone in Madhya Pradesh. Like it was all over.
Awesome. So Balaji, first we talked about why Indians are on the rise and why being a part of a network of Indians is equivalent to being as powerful as the American state as we enter the 2020s and the 2030s. Is that a fair estimate of what you said in the first part?
Well, so I don't know if you want to contest the U.S. the state level in quite the same way. I'd say that there's an opportunity opening up where people underestimate India, they underestimate Indians. Indians often underestimate themselves. India is not going to be contending for number one. And because of that, can contest a lot of anything that you can contest on a computer, which is a larger number of niches, India can get there.
Contesting America, I mean, you don't have to move to the US anymore. You can stay back at home in your hometown, open up your laptop, download a wallet, and that's effectively like having an H-1B visa and being in the US 30 years ago.
That's right. The new dorm room founder is a developing world founder, or what I call the ascending world founder.
Ascending world founder sounds better.